Now it's time to bring in our first guest, mortgage and investing expert Chris Hogan. He's also the national #1 best-selling author of the book, Everyday Millionaires. Chris, thanks so much for being back on the show.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back with you.
So it's interesting, Everyday Millionaires, unfortunately, for some today, being a millionaire in and of itself isn't quite enough to retire. So we were talking earlier on the show that a lot of people just bury their heads in the sand and they just assume they're going to have to work forever. And many could be pleasantly surprised if they knew what they were doing, if they knew how to invest for income, or knew that there were experts out there that can do that for them. They might be pleasantly surprised to find that maybe they can retire. So what do you tell people that are approaching retirement that maybe have that self-doubt? They seem to have some assets, but they're thinking, oh, I'm just going to have to work forever.
Well, I think, David, the first thing you have to do is really start to understand, what does retirement look like for you? I've encouraged people to really define their dream and really understand, are you wanting to travel? How often? Are you wanting to spend time with family? Start a dream business? Begin to really see it in high definition and understand what it is and what it's going to entail. But I think it's less about understanding a hard set number and really understanding your lifestyle, your assets, and then what are you doing right now to put yourself in a position to be able to live those dreams and not just think about them.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've done shows over the last year where some people want to downsize their house and get into mini homes, and they're just as happy that way. There's some people who've decided to take jobs on cruise ships and retire and make their vocation, their avocation, kind of sort of one and the same. So there are ways to do it on the cheap if you want, if you're willing, if you're good with that. And if not, well then you want to know that going in by knowing your goals, correct?
No, you're right. And that's what that boils down to. We've got to take the onus on ourselves. We can't sit back and you can't really have a victim mentality where you're looking to blame anyone. It's a matter of taking advantage of the time you have right now. What are you doing for yourself? For example, I was talking to a gentleman that his family spends around $3,500 eating out every month. $3,500. They're a family of 7. So I told him, I said, based on what you're doing right now, you're eating your financial future, right? You're not taking steps. So what do? You get realistic, you start to cut that back. And maybe you cut that in half or get it down to $1,000, and then let's start to invest that money. So we've got to be responsible and intentional for our dreams, for our future.
How about people, I'm sure you come across people that are preparing for retirement, they're on that final approach into retirement, but yet when you ask them what retirement means to them, what retirement's going to look like, they really don't know. In the minute or so we have left in this segment, tell our income generation members why that's actually kind of scary.
Well, it is very scary because then you don't know what life looks like. So I encourage people, listen, don't just retire to retire. You retire to move towards something else, whether it's more of your dreams and your hopes and things that you want to do. So I encourage people that are 3 or 4 years out from retirement, start to lay out a schedule. What are your first 30 and 60 days going to look like? You need to be intentional with being social. You need to be intentional with working out and doing things for yourself, but also finding some ways to give back. And so I think being intentional in that way helps us to ease that move into retirement.
Yeah, you've heard, I'm sure, people who retire and they're depressed. It was nothing like they assumed it would be. Maybe they sit around, maybe the television now, instead of being on 2 hours a day, it's on 8 hours a day, and their health starts to deteriorate and they start to alienate themselves from other people. And that's no way to go into retirement. When you're in your later years and maybe your health deteriorates, you need people, you need your friends, you need your social network. You don't need to be alienated really because you don't have a plan. Really is. Yeah. So good. So Chris, we need to take a quick commercial break. Stay with us, please. And you stay with us too. We have a lot more here in terms of words of wisdom from our good friend Chris Hogan coming up in just a bit right here on the Income Generation. We'll be right back. Now let's bring back in mortgage and investing expert, best-selling author, Chris Hogan. Chris, thanks again for sticking around.
Thank you, sir.
So why else do you think it is that some people just assume they're going to have to work forever? Now, of course, some people really do. Some people know they've saved virtually nothing. They're going to have to work forever. They can't live off Social Security alone. But how about those that actually have accumulated some money? And without thinking about what retirement means to them or doesn't mean, they make that assumption. What are some of the other reasons that you find that they just feel like it's
David, I
hopeless?
found that as I talk to people, they don't often have a lot of people within their close circle that have retired well. And what I mean by that is someone that has planned and been very intentional as they move toward it. And so oftentimes we're left to our own devices, and you don't really think that it's even possible. And I think this boils down to what you and I know is people need to grow their financial IQ, understanding the terms, understanding the tools that are out there to help you build your future. If you don't know how the tools work, then you can never maximize them. And again, I'm encouraging people through my show, the Chris Hogan Show. I want people to not only understand their dreams, I want them to chase them down and live them. Like, I think it's something that we have to have this hunger and desire to make happen for ourselves. So we need to grow in our knowledge. We need to get with professionals that have knowledge that we don't have, and we need to control our habits. Our habits are the number one determining factor on what we do and what we don't do. And I think we have the potential to do whatever we dream of.
Doing a dry run, for example. I think we may have spoken about this before. Doing a retirement dry run, saying for a year or so beforehand, I'm going to live off a fixed budget and I'm going to see what that looks like. I'm going to see what that feels like. Maybe I'll save up some vacation time. Maybe I'll take an entire month off and I'll live as a retiree. In fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you and I in previous shows have actually had that discussion.
No, I think that's a fantastic idea. And I love that you brought up the word budgeting. Budgeting is the number one tool that will help you get to retirement, but it's also a tool that's necessary for you to stay there. David, you and I both know people that have retired and had to unretire because they did it too prematurely or they didn't do it well. So us being in control of our spending is going to be really important. Think about it right now. When do people tend to spend the most? Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's when we have the most downtime. Well, if you think about retirement, retirement is the ultimate downtime. You've got time to do the things you want. So we have to flex the muscle of control and being able to stay within some financial constraints.
Yeah, and in retirement, it's as if every day is a Saturday or Sunday. That's the reality. Now, how
That's right.
about, switching gears for a minute, how about the other side? We talked about those that are afraid to even think about retirement, thinking it's just not possible for them. But how about those that are overconfident in their ability to retire? And they take a look at their money, they make some interest rate assumption, which may or may not pan out. They assume that between now and age 85 or now and age 90, they'll have enough cash flow. Not really worrying about what's going to happen after age 90 because, gosh, in their mind, it's so far away. What do you tell those folks?
Well, I think it's important to sit down and talk to an investment professional to really talk and understand where you are. It's terribly dangerous to assume. We all know that. But sitting down and talking to someone and walking through it and really looking at it and understanding it is vital. We do it all the time for our cars. Right? If there's an issue, we don't know what it is, we take it to a mechanic. We do it with our health. If there's something going on that we don't understand, we eventually go see a general practitioner or a specialist, where our money is just as important. And so as you look at your 401k or 403b statement and you're thinking, man, am I on track or am I doing what I should be? The best place to go is to find an investment professional. Now, I tell people this, David, you want to find somebody and work with someone that has the heart of a teacher. That means there's somebody that's trying to help you understand, to help you to reach your dreams. They're not just trying to sell you some stuff.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Good point. I always say education's first, and that's my personal passion when it comes to educating people financially and other areas of my life. So I'm with you 100% on that. We need to take a quick commercial break again. And when we come back, we're going to ask Chris about mortgages. You know, should you pay off your mortgage before you retire? Should you carry it through retirement? Do you need the tax deduction? Let's get the straight answers right from Chris Hogan as soon as we return. We'll be back in a minute right here on The Income Generation. Now it's time to bring back for one last segment best-selling author, investing, and yes, mortgage expert, Chris Hogan. Chris, thanks for sticking around for so long today.
Yes, sir. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So, you know, you've heard this too, people saying, well, I want to carry my mortgage into retirement because I need a tax deduction. Frankly, that's all I have for a tax deduction. Other people have just gotten so accustomed to the payment, they think they're going to have mortgage payment forever. Yet others feel as though, you know, I want to go into retirement completely debt-free. Talk to us about that.
Well, there are many schools of thought, David, and you've hit all of them right on the nail on the head. But I'd encourage people to think of it this way. Interest that you pay is a penalty. right? If I'm paying using someone else's money, they charge me a penalty in the form of interest. And debt brings risk. It brings an obligation. You have to make a payment. Debt doesn't care if you're sick. It doesn't care if you lose a job or if your child is sick. It's just a taker. So I encourage people, if we're trying to move forward and live our dreams, do the things we want to do on our own time frames, I want you to be free of debt and obligation. So I would say definitely pay off the home. The mindset of keeping the mortgage simply for the tax deduction this is an old school myth that drives me bonkers, because you can do charitable giving and get the same tax deduction without the risk or debt or threat of a mortgage as you could holding on to it. And let's be honest, you only get to deduct the interest if you fully itemize your taxes, and not everyone even does that. So let's make it simple. Pay off the home, own it outright, move and live your dreams, do some giving, and you can get a tax deduction.
Well, now, and with the changes in the tax law, too, if you think about it, fewer and fewer people can itemize than ever before. So there are people that were able to actually take that mortgage deduction that, as of the last year or so, cannot. But how about that person, and I'm sure that if someone were to come to you and say, I want to plan for my retirement, I want to put away money, and I've got this great 401k plan at work, and it's solely for retirement, that's my really only remaining goal. Assuming they're in a reasonably high tax bracket when they're working, is it correct to assume that you would say, yeah, max out that 401k before you do anything else, for the most part?
Oh, I would agree with you on that. You know, the 401ks and 403bs are incredible tools. You alluded to my book, Everyday Millionaires. We did the largest study that's ever been done on millionaires, talked to over 10,000 of them. Do you know the number one tool they said helped them to reach that pinnacle of wealth? Their 401ks, employer-sponsored retirement plans, 401ks, 403bs, and IRAs. And so these are tools that we all have accessibility to. We just need to use them and understand it. And David, listen, people, and you know this, people are pulling money out right and left out of 401ks. They're telling me they're paying for weddings and home renovations. Do not do that. Your 401k and 403b is your paycheck later. Don't steal from your future trying to fund your now.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. So now let's say I take your advice. I max out the 401k. I get to retirement. I've got $1 million in my 401k. I only have $50,000 sitting in the bank. I can't pay off my mortgage. Even worse, I want to go buy a car. I deplete a good part of that $50,000. My wife needs to buy a car. Guess what? I'm out of ammunition. It's got to come out of the 401k. So in the last, in the spirit of being debt-free with your mortgage then, in the last 45 seconds we have left, how do we balance that 401k versus non-401k so we can actually get that mortgage paid by the time we retire?
Well, I think it really boils down to being really intentional. You know, some people move into retirement and they still have the mortgage. I just want to encourage them to have the mindset of paying it off. Don't let it hang around. But again, on the front end, be prepared. I want you to have a fully funded emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses. And let's be prepared to cash flow and do some things. You want to be smart. You want to be careful and just be intentional. And we can never confuse a want with a need, right? Needs are things we have to have. Wants are things we'd like to have.
Always some great words of wisdom, Chris. I really appreciate you being on the show. Thanks again.
Always good to be with you. Thank you, sir.
All right, stay with us. We'll be back in just a moment with more right here on The Income Generation. I'm David Scranton, and we'll be right back.